Just sound like a kind of sheep and you'll be fine. Bonjour tout le monde! Hi guys! So in this video I wanted to give you some tips and tricks that I've learned for speaking French more accurately and more confidently. So I've been living in France and I've picked up tons of useful little things to insert right into your conversation to make it run more smoothly and to make you sound more authentic and essentially closer to the way that a native would speak. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is something super simple and easy that you can do. I wanted to give you some little inserts or expressions that you can put into your everyday conversation and make you sound more like a native. Fill out your conversation, make it natural and make it flow. So fillers. Fillers are really important in French. They use them a lot. And one of the key things that you should do if you don't want to sound like you're not a native is to make sure that you are using the native fillers. Okay, so at the very base level of this is the type of expressions that we use when we're looking for a word or in between sentences. So in English it's more like ah. In French it has a very distinct French sound. So if you're inserting or ah into your conversations, they will immediately know that you're not French. So you really have to give it that French twang as such, make it sound like more like bon. Just sound like a kind of sheep and you'll be fine. They also use the word genre quite a lot, although it does vary from region to region, but I know that they use it here, which is just a quick way of saying like. So again, if you are thinking of something to say or thinking of a different way to say something, you can slip that right in there. They also use en tout cas, du coup, to start sentences or to finish sentences, which kind of mean like in all case or anyway type thing. And then we have enfin and après, which rather mean then or finally rather than after. They also use tu vois a lot, which obviously in English is do you see, like do you understand. It's a kind of like tag phrase that you would put on the end of a sentence just to check that your locutor is understanding what you're saying. The two things they use a lot as well are tant pis and tant mieux, which kind of mean never mind or well, that's better then. So if you're talking about something that's gone wrong, at the end they might say oh well, tant pis. Or if you're talking about something that has gone well for you or that maybe wasn't going to go well for you and then it did, they might say tant mieux. That's something you can say if you're not exactly sure how to further or continue the conversation, but just to show that you've understood the nature of the conversation and what they've said to you. One that is really useful is the word truc, which literally means a thing. It's like chose, but it's a bit less formal, and you can use that literally everywhere, like the way that we would use thing in English. Particularly this is really useful when you have forgotten a word in French and you're searching for it and you don't have the time to think about it. Another one that could be quite important is if you're addressing a group of people, or particularly maybe online, you might want to call them les gars, which is another way of saying guys, just a bit less formal. Also, one thing that I've noticed that the French do a lot is again with the fillers. They will always say oh tac tac tac, and I love the way that they say it. But if you wanted to point to something or you're just trying to fill a gap and you want to sound a bit more French, you might point to something and just go oh tac, or I'm gonna sign here oh tac, and it just makes you sound a little bit more Frenchified. And it's the same as in English as just saying oh that I can't with myself. One point that I think is really important that I didn't realise that I was getting wrong until I actually reflected upon it and realised that it was wrong was the use of c'est ok or like c'est bon. So I was actually saying literally c'est as in that is okay in English, and I was using it if I was refusing something or just turning something down politely, because in English we go no, it's okay, as in it's fine, I don't want that, I'm fine the way I am. So I literally directly translated that and I realised it doesn't really have the same sense and it doesn't make you sound like you're refusing something, because for them it sounds like you're saying oh that is actually okay, yes I want that, I want what you're offering to me, even though obviously for you it's the converse. So in order to avoid doing that, it's just easy to say c'est bon, no merci, c'est bon, and that just shows that you're okay, you're fine, you don't want what they're offering, you're just being polite. So if you're at a dinner table with some French people, you may find yourselves in that situation and someone is offering you some more food and you don't want any more, you say no c'est bon merci rather than no c'est okay, because they're not sure whether to give you some more food, whether you're okay with what you've got, or okay yes I want some more. It just avoids confusion. Another thing they use quite a lot is c'est pas grave or ce n'est pas grave to be more formal and correct, which I guess you could say in English means, oh, that's not grave, that's not serious. But again, for them, it means it's fine. It's usually if you've done a little mistake and the other person like forgives you as such, but really in English, it's just like saying, oh, that's fine, oh, don't worry about it. So I don't know, for example, you might spill a drink or something and you think you've upset the person next to you and they just might say, oh, c'est pas grave. And it's just a really simple way of saying, oh, don't worry about it, it's fine. Also, what they tend to do a lot is using the word quoi at the end of sentences just to kind of emphasize a point or add a little bit of colour to it, a little bit of emotion. It can sometimes sound a little sarcastic, so someone might say, oh, c'est pas normal quoi, which is kind of like, that can't be normal, can it? It's just a way of emphasising the end of the sentences, like a little tag phrase at the end. And you can literally add that to anything that you're saying that's maybe got an element of opinion or, like I said, colour, whereby it's not neutral. That makes you sound a little bit more like a native. Okay, the next point is that I've noticed that there are certain words in French that don't seem to really have an equivalent translation in English, so you may have not learnt it when you are translating from English to French, but they're words that are used quite frequently in the French language that are just useful to know. So the first word is the verb bouleverser or bouleversement for the noun, which when you translate it in Google Translate, it gives you to upset in English. But I would say it's more nuanced than that. It's a bit more dramatic, again, a little bit more coloured, so it's not neutral. You would perhaps use it if you had seen something, for example, j'ai vu cet documentaire qui m'a bouleversé, which would kind of mean like I saw this documentary that touched me or shocked me or that really changed something in me. And I feel like it's just a really succinct way of putting all those emotions in one word. It can maybe seem a bit exaggerated, but it's definitely more nuanced than just saying upset. That's really a good word to remember and use. The second one is really important, and I've heard this used a lot, and it's the verb raconter, which literally means to tell or say something, but again, it's more nuanced than that. And you'd more often see it in the context of telling a story, for example, or you're telling somebody something that's happened throughout your day, or you're telling somebody something that someone else has said, and you are literally recounting what has happened or what they've said. Or it can even be used if someone's speaking complete nonsense to you and you say to them, qu'est-ce que tu racontes? What are you saying? Like, what are you telling me? So it's more emphasized than simply telling someone. So that's a really useful one to use and to understand the difference between dire or parler, because again, it's just using more specific context and it's really useful to have that in your vocabulary. Okay, so speaking of nuanced words, I have some more examples of where the nuance is important in opinion phrases. So I feel like when you're learning French, you learn the simple phrases like je pense and je crois, which yes, are used quite frequently in French. When I got here, I realized that they were also using expressions such as j'avoue or j'imagine, which are I admit and I guess that, which I tend to find are more frequently used than simply saying je pense, because like I said, it adds a bit more of a nuance and it adds a bit more of an opinion to the opinion phrase, if that's possible. And when it comes to using je crois as opposed to using je pense, again, I would say that je crois is more insistent. It's like you believe in it, even though that may sound a little exaggerated. If you are pretty much sure of something, you would use this rather than je pense, which I feel can be used when there is a degree of uncertainty. So going into some more useful phrases, I found that the phrase ça sert à is used quite frequently in French, which would literally mean that serves as in English, but is more widely used as that is useful for, or you could use that for, or it functions in this way. So you might say ça sert à quoi in the question form, which would mean what is that good for, what's it used for, what is its function. Or you might say it in a phrase like un aspirateur sert à nettoyer, which would mean that a hoover or a vacuum is used for cleaning, which is a really easy way that you can slip it into any sentence and it will make sense. Another one which is really important is the verb se passer, which literally in English might sound like what passes, but it's more like what's happening. And often I find that it's used in the question form qu'est-ce qui se passe very often. Literally in English, again, it means what's passing or what is happening. And I find that this is quite a good phrase that you could use if, say, you were speaking with a group of people, for example, and you left that group to do something. you came back, they had continued their conversation and you'd lost the thread of it and you now didn't understand what they were talking about. So you might come back into the conversation and say, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? What's happened? What were you talking about? Or if something maybe has gone wrong, or there's been a mistake or an accident or something just in general everyday life, you might say qu'est-ce qui s'est passé or qu'est-ce qui se passe. For example, if you were in a bar and you heard two people arguing outside, you might say qu'est-ce qui se passe. It's more of like what has happened in this situation or what has changed in this situation that I want to understand. Or if you're not in the loop and you want to catch up. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is the use of Verb Learn, which is the French slang whereby they take a word and they invert it and create a new word which then goes into the dictionary. And they do this quite a lot with everyday words. So the thing that I've heard them say quite a lot is un truc d'ouf, which again is using that word truc, which means thing. And then we've got the word ouf, which is the reverse of fou, which means crazy, minus the S when you reverse it. So altogether that gives you un truc d'ouf, which is like a crazy thing or that's insane kind of remark that you would say after you've seen something that's impressive or maybe that's not impressive, but that makes you want to comment on it in a expressive way. So you might see a video and say that's un truc d'ouf. Another word that is commonly used is the word meuf, which comes from the word femme, which means woman. They reverse that around and it kind of gives you a less formal way of saying femme. More means kind of chick or girl. I don't think it's particularly rude in any way, I just think it's less formal than saying femme. And then another word that we have is the word relou, which is the reverse of lourd, which means heavy. So you might use that to say, oh, that was heavy, in a way of that was a bit irritating or that annoyed me or that's a bit intense. It's just a little bit less formal than saying lourd. So for my last tip, this is a life hack that is absolutely essential if you are learning French: the placement of pronunciation in the French language. So the thing that is really important is that you have to not stress certain syllables or sounds within the French language. Everything has to be said evenly and with even stress and pronunciation. For example, English is a stress language, so there are certain parts of the word that we say more stressed than others, and even in some cases it means that if you put stress on a certain part of the word, it completely changes the word's meaning. For example, we have the word frequent or frequent, so if you are putting the emphasis on the free part of the word, frequent, it would mean that you're doing something habitually or regularly, but if you did it the other way and put the emphasis on the quent, you'd say frequent, that would mean that you're visiting somewhere, and it completely changes the meaning of the language. And I think for learners that come from a stress language like English to a non-stress language like French, this is one of the hardest things to adapt to, and it was one of the things that I actually never learned at school, that the pronunciation of each letter and each sound in each word has to be even, or else it makes it sound a bit odd to them, I guess. So it's got to be all evenly allocated and placed, and that's how you can identify yourself as someone that sounds a bit more authentic than someone that's come from a stress language and hasn't familiarized themselves with that concept. Okay, so we've reached the end of my tips and tricks and advice for using French language in the spoken language. Obviously, I'm not a teacher. These are just the things that I have learned by being here in France itself. Perhaps not things that you would put in an essay, but they are super simple and easy to just insert in conversation that make you sound more authentic and less like someone that's learning the language. Obviously, there's no correct way to pick up things or learn things, but these are my personal tips and I found that they were really useful when I came here and definitely helped me along the way. And if you insert these little phrases and tips into your everyday French, you'll notice how your comprehension and understanding becomes so much easier. Let me know if you think these have been useful. Don't forget to follow me on all my socials, linked in the description box, and don't forget to check out my previous videos. Subscribe for more Francophone content, and don't forget to give the video a big thumbs up. So all that's left to say is thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in my next video. À bientôt les amis!